The kind of people always hurrying to catch up, missing the point of things that everyone else grasps at once. She wished she'd had worn nylons instead of knee socks. It was arranged that Donnie would visit a psychologist for testing. Mr. Lanham knew just the person. He would set this boy straight, he said. When they when they stood to leave, Daisy held her stomach in and gave Mr. Lanham a firm, responsible handshake. Donnie said the psychologist was a jackass and the tests were really dumb, but he kept all three of his appointments. And when it was time for the follow-up conference with the psychologist and both parents, Donnie combed his hair and seemed unusually sober and subdued. The psychologist said Donnie had no serious emotional problems. He was merely going through a difficult period in his life. He required some academic help and a better sense of self-worth. For this reason, he was suggesting a man named Calvin Beadle, a tutor with considerable psychological training. In the car going home, Donnie said he'd be damned if he'd let them drag him to some stupid tutor. His father told him to watch his language in front of his mother. That night, Daisy lay awake, pondering the term self-worth. She had always been free with her praise. She had always told Donnie he had talent, was smart, was good with his hands. She had made a big to-do over every little gift he gave her. In fact, maybe she had gone too far, although Lord knows she had meant every word. Was that his trouble? She remembered when Amanda was born. Donnie had acted lost and bewildered. Daisy had been alert to that, of course, but still a new baby keeps you so busy. Had she really done all she could have? She longed, she ached for a time machine. Given one more chance, should do it perfectly. Hug him more, praise him more, or perhaps praise him less. Ugh, who can say? The tutor told Donnie to call him Cal. All his kids did, he said. Daisy thought for a second that he meant his own children, then remembered her mistake. He seemed too young anyhow to be a family man. He wore a heavy, brown, handlebar mustache. His hair was as long and stringy as Donnie's, and his jeans were faded. Wire-rimmed spectacles slid down his nose. He lounged in a canvas director's chair with his fingers laced across his chest, and he casually, amiably questioned Donnie, who sat upright and glaring in an armchair. "So, they're getting on your back at school," said Cal, "making a big deal about anything you do wrong?" "Right," said Donnie. "Any idea why that would be?" "Oh, well, stuff like homework and all," Donnie said. "You don't do your homework?" "Oh, well, I might do it sometimes, but not exactly how they want it." Donnie sat forward and said, "It's like a prison there, You've got to go to every class. You can never step off the school grounds." "You cut classes sometimes?" "Sometimes," Donnie said with a glance at his parents. Cal didn't seem perturbed. "Well," he said, "I'll tell you what. Let's you and me try to work together 3 nights a week. Think you can handle that? We'll see if we can show that school of yours a thing or two. Give it a month. Then if you don't like it, we'll stop. If I don't like it, we'll stop. I mean, sometimes people just don't get along, right? What do you say to that?" "Okay," Donnie said. He seemed pleased. "Make it 7 o'clock till 8, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday." Cal told Matt and Daisy. They nodded, and Cal shambled to his feet, gave them a little salute, and showed them to the door. This was where he lived as well as worked, evidently. The interview had taken place in the dining room, which had been transferred into a kind of office. Passing the living room, Daisy winced at the rock music she had been hearing without registering it ever since she had entered the house. She looked in and saw a boy about Donnie's age lying on the sofa with a book. Another boy and a girl were playing ping pong in front of the fireplace. "You have several here together?" Daisy asked Cal. "Oh, sometimes they stay on after their sessions just to rap. They're a pretty sociable group, all in all. Plenty of goof-offs like young Donnie here." He cuffed Donnie's shoulder playfully. Donnie flushed and grinned. Climbing into the car, Daisy asked Donnie, "Well, what do you think?" But Donnie had returned to his old evasive self. He jerked his chin toward the garage. "Look," he said, "he's got a basketball net." Now, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, they had supper early the instant Matt came home. Sometimes they had to leave before they were really finished. Amanda would still be eating her dessert. "Bye, honey, sorry," Daisy would tell her. Cal's first bill sent a flutter of panic through Daisy's chest. But it was worth it, of course. Just look at Donnie's face when they picked him up, alight and full of interest. The principal telephoned Daisy to tell her how Donnie had improved. Of course, it hasn't shown up in his grades yet, but several of his teachers have noticed how his attitude's changed. "Yes, sir, I think we're on to something here." At home, Donnie didn't act much different. He still seemed to have a low opinion of his parents, but Daisy supposed that was an unavoidable part of being 15. He said his parents were too controlling, a word that made Daisy give him a sudden look. He said they acted like wardens. On weekends, they enforced a curfew, and any time he went to a party, they always telephoned first to see if adults would be supervising. "For God's sake," he said, "don't you trust me?" "It isn't a matter of trust, honey, but there was no explaining to him. His tutor called one afternoon. "I get the sense," he said, "that this kid's feeling underestimated, like you folks expect the worst of him. I'm thinking we ought to give him more rope." "But see, he's still so suggestible," Daisy said. "When his friends suggest some mischief, smoking or drinking or such, why, he just finds it hard not to go along with them." "Mrs. Cobble," the tutor said, "I think this kid is hurting. Here's a serious, sensitive kid telling you he'd like to take on more grown-up challenges, and you're giving him the message that he can't be trusted. Don't you understand how that hurts?" "Oh," said Daisy, "it undermines his self-esteem. Don't you realize that?" "Well, I guess you're right," said Daisy. She saw Donnie suddenly from a whole new angle. His pathetically poor posture, that slouch so forlorn that his shoulders seemed about to meet his chin. Oh, wasn't it awful being young? She'd had a miserable adolescence herself and had always sworn no child of hers would ever be that unhappy. They let Donnie stay out later. They didn't call ahead to see if the parties were supervised, and they were careful not to grill him about his evening. The tutor had set down so many rules. They were not allowed any questions at all about any aspect of school, nor were they to speak with his teachers. If a teacher had some complaint, she should phone Cal. Only one teacher disobeyed, the history teacher, Miss Evans. She called one morning in February. "I'm a little concerned about Donnie, Mrs. Cobble." "Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Evans, but Donnie's tutor handles these things now."